What's up? Today we're going to compare two very comparable lights. One from Amaran, this is the 300C, which we reviewed before, and a new guy, the GVM SD300C Pro. Let's get price out of the way first and foremost. This light is more expensive at $569, whereas this light is sitting right around 500 bucks. So a $60 difference may be a lot, it may be a little, depending on who you are. Maybe 500 is already on the upper end of your budget, so this is gonna fit better for you, but let's talk about what the real differences are. So let's give some history on this. Aputure is a brand that owns Amaran. Aputure's been around for a while and is being recognized more in a professional setting, whereas this is targeted more at their content creators and is a little cheaper price point. The trade-off is going to be you're not gonna get DMX inherently, and the build quality is a little more plastic-based, injection molding, whatever it is. It's not an aluminum casing, so it's not really built for going out on set. So in our case, we like to leave these in our studio. They don't really go out. They don't get shuttled around in vehicles. They just stick around in here either on stands or up in our grid, and then we save our Aputure lights for taking out on set. And as for GVM, they're a newer brand and they're new in this market of lighting. But with this light, it seems like they're trying to take the recipe and the guts of this, but putting it into something a little closer to the Aputure Storm series light fixtures. For example, we have the Aputure 300X, and the build quality in this is very similar from an exterior shell standpoint. So we're excited to see if all of that kind of comes together to be a great compromise right in the middle with this light. What's great about both these lights is they have a common mount, which is the Bowens mount. We have tons of modifiers that are Bowens mount, and you may as well. It's a very popular mount that a lot of these lights are taking advantage of, so it's good to see that these guys were smart enough to put that on there. This means for us that we can use any modifier that we already have in-house, whether that's a large softbox, small softbox, or a big lantern or something like that. Another small touch that's different between these two is when you buy this Amaran, it comes in a like foam box that's very like not friendly for transport, I would say. It's not something that I've ever wanted to put it back inside of and transport it around in, just given the way that it's built. But the GVM kind of goes after the same exact concept of the Aputure lights, where it's a soft bag that you can unzip and have all of your stuff inside of. A theme we're seeing here is that this GVM, although it's in the same price bracket as the Amaran, has the similar specs, looks like they're going after the Storm series with the Aputure lights. So interesting to see how close in performance that may sit. So I think a big pro on the Amaran lights, that if you're going to integrate lots of their lights together and add more lights down the road, whether that's going to be another Aputure fixture or these Amaran, they're all gonna show up on the same app through Sidus Link. So if you're gonna buy 3 of these, maybe 10 of these, and for example, we have at least 10, 15 of these lights at this point between the tubes and their Amaran series and the Aputure lights, the ones that are in our grid, all tucked together, they all end up on one app and you can control it through one console. So we've never seen DMX as necessarily a downside to this, because it's just not something we on a regular basis need to deal with. On the flip side, I'd say the GVM's advantage is if you're just going to be getting 1, maybe 2 lights for your small independent projects you're going to take care of, this light might fit that bill because you're not going to need to integrate many lights across a large network. So getting 1 light a little bit cheaper and having a few extra bones to put toward the next one might be your advantage in this situation. So GVM did send us this light for this comparison video, and they also included lots of good information to compare these lights, and we're gonna share that with you now. So I'm gonna run down just kind of my overall overview of this thing, things I see that I will share with you. So from the Amaran side of things, like this piece here is metal, the actual knob and the screw is metal, so that's good. This piece is plastic, but I assume there's a metal bolt with a metal inlay. That's a metal yoke. So that's pretty solid. Nothing's gonna break there. It gets very tight. I've never seen them weep even with a heavy light on it. This is all plastic. You know, the heat sink is in here. This is all plastic. Like if you drop this thing, and we actually have one that I think we've dropped and it totally smashed it all in and broke all the plastic off. So it is fragile, it's going to break when you drop it. These controls are plastic. I feel like with a good, it would smash them right in. You do have a professional connector here in the XLR. That's not a bad situation there. Switch on the bottom. 2 buttons with press button functionality. connects through Bluetooth. The screen is very viewable if you're looking right at it. But otherwise, no. Like if you get under this thing and you're looking up at it, there's a lot of view angle issues with this. So I've actually seen that a lot of times where it's up on a stand and I go to see it and I can't see what the settings are, because if I look more from here, it's just like invisible. So, but not usually a huge issue. And then you've got a plastic button here for the release. But I also will say I've never had a Aputure or Amaran modifiers that didn't fit in here, but I have had some other like Fresnels, I think, that wouldn't fit some of these faces just due to the size and the design and the way it's fat in the front. There's also a little mount for an umbrella on here, so you could put an umbrella out here in front of this. They do have that on there. So yeah, overall plasticky. Over here, we've got a really robust yoke, and it's much like the Aputure style. It's all metal through here. These are metal rosettes kind of style things in here that kind of lock it a little better, which is nice. So I'd imagine once these are tightened down, the weight of modifier, you're not gonna really like make this droop. But this knob is very plastic, but you don't have to crank it down. Like it's not about cranking it down really tight so that the friction holds it. You just crank it down to where those teeth meet and then it stays nice and solid. Same deal here, plastic knob, but a metal deal here. So this is all metal through here, which is good. It seems like there's a core in here that's metal that comes back to this aluminum backplate, which is actually very pretty. This red aluminum's, it's very nice looking. They've got this aluminum on the side with the showstopper, the LED GVM light across this side. Kind of slick, honestly, like looks pro to me. And then there's a nice mount here that's kind of like this V-lock style mount for the power supply. This isn't necessarily my favorite place for the power supply because you lose all this length. So I mean, if you're trying to have the thing farther away, you know, if your plug on the wall is farther away, you lose this length. The flip side is that the stock power cable on this light is, I would say, somewhat longer than the stock Amaran one by at least 4 times. But their lead from here to the light is much longer. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but I think this is ultimately longer. You can get to a further plug with that, which even a few feet makes a difference in some scenarios. So on the back here for your power connector, I don't know what this guy is actually called, but he's a 3-pin Delio K-Way. Not a bad thing. This is made out of plastic though, so if someone steps on that, it's probably toast. But yeah, don't step on that. Then you've got a 5-pin XLR style for your DMX in and out. It's very standard. And then power switch here, powers it up. You do have a color screen. So that's an advantage over the Amaran, is there is a color screen, so you get to see a little better. And then you can thumb through it with these selector buttons, and these knobs are very premium, I will say. The buttons leave a little to be desired on the flip side, but they're solid, they're not going anywhere. It's good stuff. I think similarly, this front design is kind of plasticky, but it's kind of bulky around the neck of these, which it's the same on the Amarans, which I think is a disadvantage for some modifiers. I did notice that this button, it's a little fiddly. It's a plastic button here. But you pull that out and it's loose and everything fits in there. But I did notice, I think we fit a handful of our modifiers with no issue, but there were a few that were either a tight fit or were difficult to get in there. So it didn't feel as universal in that sense. And it went in and it twisted, it just wouldn't latch. So, you know, some of them would stay in there and it was no big deal. Didn't necessarily inspire a lot of confidence, but I think your mileage is just going to vary a little bit as far as which modifiers are going to fit very easily. So without getting too scientific or into the details, we've used this light a handful of times and I can say that there was nothing about it that made me wish for more or wish I was using an Amaran or any other light. Honestly, as long as you understand that you needed just something to put light somewhere and it would just do the job. So for example, I never noticed any issues as far as color temperature or color rating index. Like nothing was like odd as far as the colors went. You know, you pick a color and throw it out there, it's gonna get the job done. So from a DIY sense, this thing rocks. There's not a thing wrong with it. And I would say that like saving some few bones on this and having something a little more solid, nothing wrong with it. As far as features and functionality go, I believe these lights to be very similar, but now we're gonna thumb through the menus and just give you a demo on what features are inside and kind of what those look like. So we'll point these at the back wall, just so you can kind of get a sense. Obviously it's not super scientific. All right, so we switched to the spotlight so you can get a good look at this beam and what the color and everything is looking like. So right now we're at 11%, we're on a white wall. It is what it is. Here's 100% on CCT mode, so it's 5600 Kelvin. And in that you're gonna get intensity, obviously, and we'll go to like 50 here. And then you can go all the way down to 2500, so you can be pretty dang warm. Right now our camera's balanced at 5600, so I'm sure it looks quite warm. And then we can go all the way up to 7500, which will actually start to blue out even if you're at 5600. So you get a little bit of blue or like a, you know, colder lighting situation. So that's a good range as far as CCT goes. And then you can also, situation you would want this, you have green and magenta. So if you're in a store or something like that and you have tons of lighting that's already existing within the space and you just need to augment a key light, then you have green and magenta. So you can go all the way to -1, so 0.7, 0.1, adding magenta, and then you can add green here. So that's a good feature if you're trying to match the lighting conditions that you're in and get a good balance. Okay, so if you press the intensity one in, you're gonna switch over your lighting mode. You're just gonna go between CCT and then hue mode. So now, intensity is still intensity, but this right side one is gonna go between hue. So you can pick your color hue and then how much saturation it has. So, you know, you can make like a nice light purple there, or like a light teal, or you can really saturate it out. But yeah, decent functionality there for color. So with this light, it does have functionality for doing effects and things like that, but it is more controllable through the app and not through the back of the light. So really just gonna get your basics, color, saturation, hue, and your CCT mode for intensity, CCT, and green and magenta. So it's a little more simpler from behind, but if you connect that app in Sidus Link, you can actually do quite a bit with this light as far as effects go. So let's move on to the GVM. All right. All right, this is a live test. We actually haven't done this. We're gonna see if this Aputure Fresnel, that's a 2X Fresnel, fits on this light. So let's spin it around. Put this down. Pop that out of there. Do a little experiment. The GVM dome fits on the Aputure. So in theory, why wouldn't this fit this, right? Shed in there, twist, lock, perfect, no problems. So let's flick this guy on, get him lined up. All right, so now we're gonna get into the features on the back of this thing. Now, color screen, a little more friendly. You got a lot of buttons as well. So you're not doing dual function with all of these knobs. The mode and menu button are gonna toggle between those two different menus. So if you're in mode, you can use the selector to go to what type of mode you want to be in. So we'll start with CCT, and then now these two knobs are going to control your intensity. We'll stick it at 50% there. And there actually is a little finer control here. You get 0.1, 0.2 between each intensity there. That's pretty, and it's very fine control, and it doesn't, it definitely reacts very predictably and gives you fine control there. So that's intensity. Then you have CCT from 2000, which is actually a little warmer, all the way up to, wow, 10,000 Kelvin. That's pretty high. Good stuff there. So we'll go to 56 here. And then now if you click in on this, similar to the Amaran, you can go over to your green and magenta values. It seems to do just that, adding 50 green down to 0 is no influence, and then 50 magenta. It's it actually seems subtle. Is it just my eyes tricking me? But 50 magenta doesn't seem very intense. But nevertheless, you can add those values. So let's go back to mode. So you also get HSI mode, which is gonna be your hue and saturation. Similar function to that. You click this knob, bring a switch between hue and sat. You got intensity there. So we've also got RGB modes. You can actually punch in RGB values. So if you know your RGB value for a color, you can probably get pretty close to what that should be. So if you have the RGB values for a brand color, this happened to us. We were able to punch in the RGB values right in and just get that color instantly. There is converters out there. So with the Amaran, you only get hue and saturation. You can convert to hue and saturation from RGB, but it's just one less step and a nice feature to have. Okay, so another mode, we have gel mode, and that's commonly found on airy lights. That's where I first saw it. But you can actually go through what your source light temperature is, so whether it's 5600 or 3200, and then what is RNL? Oh, it's gonna be Roscoe and Lee filters. So you got your two different filters. So then you have your Roscoe list at 3200, and you've got R23 orange down to R42 deep salmon. You even got turquoise, henna sky, classic, cerulean blue. Yeah, so a good list of Alice blue, blue bell. And then if you go back, you can go over to Lee filters and go through, even just a full CTB on a 3200 light, or a full CTO on a 3200 light, or a jazz green, magical magenta. So yeah, nice to have those if you're trying to match a specific gel color for your old school gaffers out there. That's old school. It wasn't that long ago we were using gels, but here we are. So yeah, you can back out of those. Now you've got just a source setting, so you can just pick what they've emulated as tungsten, what they've emulated for an HMI 5600, a HMI 6000, studio lamp, sodium lamp. Here's a sodium, let's look at that. There's a good sodium lamp. Halogen arc candle, candle temperature, sunset, daylight, overcast, and a CFL cool white, my favorite. So that's neat to have. And then you've got your effects built right into the back of this light. So you can go SOS with it. You can change your intensity of that. Ambulance, which is actually different from your fire engine. Then you've got disco, different than party. Disco's a little more happening. So it's nice that these features are right on the back side, and you can just go right through them. If you just like, hey, let's just throw a cop car up. You don't need your app out or nothing. You just have the cop show up. Easy like that. Cool switch. You press and hold it. It cycles power without actually turning off the main switch here. All right, so I've got both lights behind me. One's pointed on one side of the cyc. That's the Amaran. The other one, the GVM, is pointed on your left side of the cyc, my current right side of the cyc. So we've got them at 5600 and at the lowest possible lighting setting. So this is 1%, which to my eye, and I'm sure to you, is much dimmer than this one, which is at 0.1%. To my eye, the Amaran is slightly cooler than the 5600 that's coming out of this GVM. Which one is more accurate? Who knows? I don't have that thingy that you put in front of it, the spectro light meter, whatever. I don't have that. Who needs it? Okay, anyway, let's go to 50% on this guy and 50% on this guy, and yeah, to my eyes, this is like a few temperature degrees warmer potentially, and then like ever maybe 1% more green. But you know what? If you mix them, I couldn't tell you. If they're really close to each other, I can't tell. But if they're really apart, slightly cooler, in my opinion. But 50% there, I can tell that this one's still screaming more light. 100% there, 100% here. I think this is definitely brighter. Our distance from the walls, the Amaran might actually even have the advantage. This actually looks slightly closer. So this one is definitely brighter. But yeah, the color temperature is not perfection, but in a mixed lighting scenario, I doubt you'd have any issues with that. And I bet you could just, you know, why not just take this one a little cooler? Oh, that's warmer. I'm silly. That right there, that's 59, and that looks pretty dang good. Maybe 6,000. And this is common between brands. You know, I remember when Dracast and what's that one? They made those flat panel ones. They were like cloth. Westcotts. I remember the Westcotts at 5600 were a lot different than the Aputure lights at the time as far as what 56 actually was on the back of the light. But the important thing is that they match. I would say use your best judgment, look in the camera, use your eyes. You can get as close as you can, and it's gonna be perfect. So, yeah, this light's definitely winning in the CCT world for brightness. So let's hop over to HSI and just see what kind of saturation we can get out of these things. So we're at 100% saturation. I'm gonna go to 0 degrees for that perfect red that I know so well. We put them both at 100%. And this one is at 0. It's 1. You don't get 0, you get 1. So 100 degrees, or no, sorry, 1 degrees here, 0 degrees here, 100% saturation, 100% intensity. The GVM is smoking it as far as saturation goes and intensity. That thing is way more red than this, and I'm sure it looks the same on camera. I'm gonna kill my key lights so we can get a real good look at this real quick. So yeah, the key lights might have been influencing that a little bit, but even with them off, this thing is just screaming red compared to that. Now, generally it takes a lot of separation with our Amarans to make sure that our background is nice and saturated. I think that's important to do anyway, so you're not deviating from your color. But that being said, the saturation on the GVM is absolutely incredible. Let's try a different color. Maybe it's just red. Let's just go straight over to green, which is gonna be 90 degrees. And 90 degrees. There's 90, still smoking it as far as saturation goes. And then we'll go to 180. Get that blue guy going. Here's 181, 180, and 180. It looks more green to me, looks more blue, but which one's more accurate? Who's to say? I would say that almost seems purple. So, you know, there's a little green in that, and then that's purpley, so that kind of looks like a good blue to me. Our good buddy Michael Chopra just walked in, so this is a good opportunity to have a blind test to see which light he prefers at the most saturated red. All right, so Chopra, tell me, on the left side and the right side, we have two different lights. I want your opinion on which red is, I don't know, better, or can you just describe them and how they're different?
This red looks a little more washed out on the right side. The left side red looks more full and intense. And just more pleasing to look at. So I'm gonna say the one on the left is better.
On this side, we have the Amaran 300C, which comes in at $569. Over here, we have the GVM, Good Video Maker Light, SD300C, comes in at $500. So you chose that one for the more intense and more saturated red. Now it's pretty obvious the differences. Let's check out what you can do and control through the app. Pretty much looks exactly like the app, exactly like the screen, but through your phone. That's cool. That's actually pretty user-friendly as far as programming a sequence. I don't know, pretty good stuff there. But yeah, you basically just connect It'll show up through Bluetooth. You gotta connect it, and then bada bing. Standing here with this red behind me coming from the Amaran, it's a little bit dull. I would say it's at a disadvantage due to the placement of this key, but it would need some work to make that work. Now, whereas if I walk over here and I stand in front of this, that red behind me is quite saturated. There is a light here that is casting onto it, so it's not like it has a full advantage over it. It does have that spill going on, but this is almost good to go. There's pretty much nothing I need to do to make this red work as a red background. So interesting that just kind of throwing these lights up and trying it out, we can make those observations, but I think there's a clear winner as far as saturation goes. Now, what I'm very interested in doing next is seeing their 600 watt version of this, because that's gonna be a true testament. I think if it performs as well as this, that price point for that much performance is going to be hard beat by Amaran from any of their offerings or Aputure. The highest level light right now from Amaran in this cob light setup is a 300 watt. So going to a 600 watt is a whole different story when you hop over to Aputure. That 600C from Aputure is thousands of dollars. Jumping through GVM's site, it was interesting to see they make a 1200C, that's 1200 watts of color light. So imagine pretty much similar functionality as far as settings go, but at 1200 watts, that's 4 times as much as this. That would be quite the light to have. It's at $4,000 about, so it's a bit different of an animal to get into, but interesting nonetheless. Next, we're gonna do some real world use case using this light as a key light with a couple different models to see what this thing can look like. Some overall thoughts here is I'm really impressed by the GVM. Honestly, I kind of went in with lower expectations, not knowing the brand. You know, knowing Amaran's owned by Aputure, you kind of have a good sense that, hey, I've used Aputure lights. I know that I like them and they're good, so this can't be too far off. But honestly, the side-by-side comparison was very eye-opening as far as intensity and the saturation goes. I think it's very important because that deep saturated color goes a long way when you're trying to light on set. I feel like that's most of the time what we're battling with our lighting scenarios, is just making sure that there's good separation from your key and fill lights to not oversaturate things that you want colored. Especially here in the psych room, we do it a lot where we're trying to color the background to a certain color. Keeping the key lights off is much of a challenge. So having a much deeper saturation allows you to get away with a little bit more spill and still have a deep saturation color. So this thing kind of looked dull and dim here today, and I've never felt that way about this light. I've always thought it was a champ. Now, that's not to say that it's not good. Having a lot of them and having the good functionality in between is a huge advantage. So in conclusion for these lights, the real deal is that if you need a lot of lights, this is gonna be the one for you, in my opinion. Maybe I'm just saying that because we already have a lot of them, but it's an excellent light. It's going to offer a lot of features, especially through the Sidus Link app, and a lot of functionality, and just continuity throughout your lighting system. They have a lot of other offerings that kind of make that series and that line worth it. On the flip side, the GVM really impressed me today as far as performance goes. A lot of performance packed into this package for the price. I think if you're that owner op who just needs a couple lights to get the work done, this thing is gonna be killer for you. And for me and us, I don't mind having it around, and I wouldn't mind a few other options like this in the toolbox. So that thing's pretty sick. So exciting stuff. I found today to be very eye-opening as far as these lights go. So exciting stuff, exciting to see what's next for us as far as checking out some new lights. So thanks for watching to all of you, and thank you to GVM for sending this thing over. If you have any questions about either of these lights, throw it in the comments, hit that like button if you liked hearing me talk about this stuff, and so please subscribe. More subscribing is more good for more of us. For more better, for more videos, for more you. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.